The following program is intended for mature audiences.
In my hand.
Moody's revelation.
In my hand. Then in my mouth.
This is a conspiracy.
You can't handle the truth.
A new world order.
That's it.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast. It is Monday, August 18th. Well, some developments over the weekend. We're going to talk about those right now. So let's get into the headlines for this weekend, which is basically Trump has put forth a pragmatic peace plan, and Putin calls out mail-in ballots as a source of fraud in the U.S. election. Well, a lot of this we already know, and now, it looks like my podcast is already hanging up. This has been a terrible state for me the past week. I got back and had a lot of things going on, and I got back into the routine of putting, episodes up or going live every morning, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. on Rumble. And when I started doing it again, the stream on Rumble is just completely choppy, stuttering, whatever. So I don't know if it's hanging up again. My feed starts hanging up. So not sure why that's happening, but it is time for a new laptop. And now I'm getting audio interference too. So Trump's pragmatic peace plan, we're going to get into those stories and more coming up right now. So bear with me. And if your stream or my stream is hanging up, just hang with me, see if we can clear it up. We're going to start out with the New York Times, which is problematic, and this is the liberal media's take, is that after meeting the Russian President Trump told European leaders he now favors giving up territory Ukraine controls to Russia to end the fighting, a concession Ukraine has long opposed. So just bear with me here. I got to try to fix something. Yeah, I don't know why the stream is hanging up. I'm going to try to fix it. If it is hanging up on your end, just bear with me and see if we can't do something about it. Well, this is the New York Times take, is to cede land in the peace of Ukraine. That has nothing to do with the proposal whatsoever. Here are some basic facts. First of all, Russia will never give up Crimea. And I stated this 100 times before. It's a strategic position to protect their Black Sea naval fleet. And now I don't have, this is another problem here. Yeah, I'm going to get to this other New York Times story in just a second. I thought I'd lost it. But the liberal mainstream media's idea that somehow Russia doesn't have any territorial concerns or strategic concerns whatsoever. And I'm going to get to that when we get to the New York Times story. But here's the deal. If Ukraine gets Western alliance security concerns, even if it's not with NATO, Russia needs a buffer zone against a Western push eastward, which has been going on since 1990, obviously. They're not going to give up Crimea. They need the buffer zone of the Donbass. And the deal is going to be there's going to be a security plan for Ukraine, whether it involves NATO or not. Trump now is saying that Ukraine joining NATO is a non-starter for Russia, and giving up Crimea particularly is a non-starter. If there are no security guarantees or NATO doesn't go into Ukraine, some of the Donbass may be rescinded back to Ukraine. But everybody, including Maggie Brennan on Sunday, on Face the Nation on Sunday, said, didn't you ask Russia to give up control of their territorial gains? Why would Russia ever do that? They've lost 1 million soldiers. Russia is concerned with the fight for their very survival as far as they're concerned. Let's see now. Did we get some of the stream back? It's still. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't work. We'll see. The key is, as I mentioned before, as the technical problems is, I was able to control it before the stuttering and to some degree, and now it's completely uncontrollable. So the case for a new laptop is here. Sorry about that. It's probably going to happen this week, or I probably won't be broadcasting next week, and I may not be here one of the days this week as well. And then when I come back, though, hopefully I'm going to have a new laptop, but we'll see. I've been trying to get the funds together, and also the real push had to deal with, whether tariffs were going to affect Apple computer costs, which obviously is an issue. But at this very time, I was bombarded with a lot of other huge expenses, and when it rains, it pours. So let's get back to, if we can, get back to the headlines here. One American News is reporting Clinton says she would nominate Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize if he helps end Russia-Ukraine war. Well, the only way he's going to be able to end the war are Russian concessions. And even Marco Rubio was talking about meat grinder and stuff, and this is a war of attrition. Of course it is. It's the West's plan to use Ukraine and its young men to grind down Russia's military capability and or have them display some of their military advancements, which they haven't really done yet. A couple missile advancements they have. So, Just the News is reporting Trump says Ukraine cannot get Crimea, join NATO in any deal to end the war with Russia. And this is obviously, this is a no-brainer. I don't know what people are thinking. People are like still in the mindset that the United States can go around demanding things of countries. And the problem is with military powers like those of the size of Russia and others, China, even bigger powers like Pakistan and whatnot, you just don't have the sway that you do with smaller military countries as well. So I tried something the other day that kind of helped a little bit. We'll see if that works. Yeah, I was online with a couple people from OBS and then a couple other software people that were trying to help me through this. And it's kind of a conundrum that I would have to, the laptop has a bunch of issues. I'm not going to digress too much into them, but, if I update my OS, I give up certain capabilities that I need. And if I don't update, I can't get the software fixed for this problem. So it just might have to come down to a new laptop, which I need anyway. All right, let's move on. The New York Post shares Just the News' headline. Trump says Zelensky can end the war with Russia almost immediately by doing these two things ahead of the White House meeting. And they're meeting today, I believe right now. President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to, or he can continue to fight. Remember how it started, no getting back Obama given Crimea 12 years ago without a shot being fired, and no going into NATO by Ukraine. Some things never change, the commander-in-chief proclaimed in a late True Social post. And to be honest with you, this is a given. Doesn't matter what Obama did. And we're going to get to a little more truth from the matter here. But as soon as the Maidan Revolution occurred and as soon as Ukraine switched its allegiance from Russia to the West, Russia saw the writing on the wall. So that was the successful color revolution, the Maidan Revolution in 2014. But 7 years earlier, people don't know about another Ukrainian revolution sponsored by the CIA and probably George Soros as well. Soros bragged about starting the Maidan Revolution or funding the Maidan Revolution, but he was probably involved in the Orange Revolution in 2007 as well. But that was clearly CIA and had Western backing, obviously. And so second time's a charm. So I wanted to go to this New York Times article. Putin sees Ukraine through a lens of grievance over lost glory. Speaking after Friday's summit, President Putin again implied that the war is all about Russia's diminished status since the fall of the Soviet Union. That's not necessarily true. The reality is that Russia knows it has a diminished status, regardless. It decided to give up its territorial ambitions because if you know anything about communism and socialism, it's internationalism or globalism, as you like to call it, as some people like to call it. So when they gave up their territorial ambitions and their globalist, the communist ideal of spreading socialism all over the world, like all socialism is a conspiracy that insists on itself spreading. So when it gave that up, it says, all right, we're going to pull back to here. We're going to be the Russian Federation of Federated States. We just don't want the West to come closer. And then NATO never gave up its mission statement. Still, even though Russia wasn't communist, was to still undermine the Russian state, which has continually tried to do. The New York Times says, oh, it's a grievance, and many people on the left have said that, many establishment people have said, is that it's all Vladimir Putin is trying to reconstitute the Soviet Union. That is not true at all. The reason this Putin sees Ukraine through a lens of grievance over lost, it has nothing to do with it over lost glory. It's nothing to do with lost glory. It has to do with the West going into Ukraine for a variety of reasons. At first, I thought it was because Western agri companies wanted to get hold of Europeans' breadbasket, and actually it was a GMO thing. They wanted to get into Ukraine and then turn all, the natural farming into agribusiness and to use GMO and chemical fertilizers, all these things, which they do. They do use chemical fertilizer, but that's what I thought at the point. But there was a wider goal by Western intelligence, the Club of Berne, Western military powers, and the corporate fascists who want to get a friendly government in Russia, so regime change, so that they can exploit the natural resources there. Because Russia's vast country and very rich in natural resources, and it's the biggest country by area outside of corporate control, multinational corporate control. And so that's the beef. If people really want to know, it's not Vladimir Putin trying to reconstitute the Soviet Union. It's not what he's trying to do. All right, Associated Press has the headline. And now my scene switcher is out. It's just, I got to do something here. It's just nothing. I don't know what I did. I was doing a lot of video work. I had a lot of work to do, but I was doing a lot of video work on the computer. And even though I purged all the files and everything, I still got issues. So, let's go to scene number 4. Where we're going to have to stay for the rest of the podcast here. Associated Press, European leaders to join Ukraine Zelensky for meeting with Trump. So the establishment media is trying to portray this as the Europeans are going there to support Zelensky and the war. And then it shows a picture of van der Leyen with Zelensky there. It's, yes, in a sense, but she's the face of the corporate fascists. So it's the corporate fascists that want to support the war of attrition with Russia for the aim of regime change, with no regard for what they care about Ukraine. The West is already in Ukraine. The corporations are in Ukraine. The biolabs are in Ukraine. The GMO is in Ukraine. I mean, we've taken over Ukraine. But now the eye is on the bigger prize, Russia. And so PJ Media was talking about Rubio's Sunday talk circuit yesterday, and I watched him on Face the Nation. I don't have a clip for you. It probably wouldn't play anyway. But he didn't have much to say because he wasn't going to say anything ahead of the meeting with Zelensky and Europe because he would have spoiled the peace process. What he constantly got egged on for about was that, first of all, you know, are you going to tell, Margaret Brennan said, are you going to tell Russia to give up all the territory they gained? You know, withdraw their troops from Ukraine. That's never going to happen. That wasn't the point of Russia's invasion. Russia's invasion was create a buffer zone to protect Crimea and their Black Sea fleet, period. So from the Sunday show, PJ Media writes, Secretary Rubio nukes Margaret Brennan. This is such a stupid media narrative that European leaders are coming here tomorrow because Trump is going to bully Zelensky into a bad deal. We've been working with these people for weeks. We've invited them to come. Because Margaret Brennan said, like a matter of factly, I screwed up. This is from another story. Yeah, I lost the other. Yeah. Everything got messed up just recently, you know, because I was doing a hard drive clean. I was trying to clean out everything on the hard drive. It didn't really seem to help. In any case, the reality here is that Secretary Rubio said to Margaret Brennan, you know, this is a stupid media narrative that it's really us and the Europeans. Zelensky is a puppet. The Ukrainians sort of have no say, but diplomatically, Rubio is going to say that. Rubio is going to say, the Ukrainians are going to decide, you know, what they want to do. And because they need to be in the peace process, but realistically, they don't have any power in the peace process. They cannot wage war without Western help, period. And the West has been fairly successful, but Russia is a considerable adversary. So they're not going to win. If Ukraine was left to their own devices, they'd be overwhelmed in weeks. So they can't do anything without the West. So it's really the West to dictate what's going to happen here. But is Zelensky going to be bullied? Well, he's a puppet. He doesn't have to be bullied. He just has to be told what he needs to do. So, and as I said many times, you're never going to expel Russia from the Donbass or from Crimea. You're just not going to do it, right? Without significant risk of nuclear war. One American News says Putin says that Ukraine war would not have happened if Trump won 2020 election. Well, we all know that because the whole point was if you really didn't or wanted to dissuade Russia from doing whatever it is doing, you wouldn't be talking about Ukraine joining NATO. And the other thing is, you certainly would have had a swift response and not exactly what Obama and Biden did, is to allow Russia to have an incursion. And the reasoning being is the reason they wanted an incursion is they wanted the catalyst, the reason to have this protracted war of attrition against Russia. Putin said, I'd like to remind you that in 2022, during the last contact with the previous administration, I tried to convince my previous American colleague the situation should not be brought to the point of no return when it comes to hostilities. Because most media watchers don't know what was transpiring between the West and Russia, what the dialogue was. Russia, just like they've been doing since 1991, is stop coming eastward, in reference to NATO and Western intelligence. Putin said following the meeting with Trump, and I said it quite directly back then, that's a big mistake today when President Trump is saying that if he was the president back then, there would be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be, so I can confirm that. That is one of the main reasons they rigged the 2020 election, because they wanted to prosecute the war with Russia and Western Europe, or Europe, was all ready to go. And if Trump would have gotten back into office, it would have derailed their plans. And because that's what Trump does, is derail the plans of the establishment. Post-millennial, Trump calls for an end to mail-in balloting. We are now the only country in the world that uses mail-in voting. All others that gave it up because massive voter fraud encountered. I've been saying this since 2019, that mail-in balloting, even in response to the pandemic, shouldn't have been an issue. There was plenty of time for people, if they were worried about going to the polls, is to receive an absentee ballot, which has certain restrictions, more robust identity requirements. And so that's, they brought in the pandemic to get rid of Trump, but specifically the reasoning is to bring in the pandemic to undermine the 2020 election by bringing in mail-in balloting, or to cancel the election, but to bring in mail-in balloting to cause fraud, to perpetuate the fraud scheme. Why didn't we have mail-in balloting before the pandemic? Because it invites fraud. The pandemic's been over some time. The fact that Republicans haven't been calling for the removal of mail-in balloting is suspect. Other big story today from PJ Media, vaporized study undermines CO2 scare as media screams climate doom. Since carbon is a necessary building block of all life on the earth, including human life, it ought to be obvious that elevated carbon levels are not deadly. I've been saying this for years. Carbon dioxide is not a poison gas. They confuse and conflate it with carbon monoxide that comes out of your vehicle. And then they show pictures of traffic and they go, carbon dioxide is polluting the earth. Motor vehicles do not emit carbon dioxide. They emit carbon monoxide, which in fact is poisonous. But carbon dioxide is a naturally occurring gas that we need. We exhale and plants inhale and is a necessary building block to human life. We all know this. And so for them to include that in the climate scare was a bridge too far and actually jumping the shark, because that's immediately when I said, well, the climate thing is a hoax because they went too far. Anything that emits carbon dioxide is contributing to pollutant. And then the Wall Street Journal has, is CO2 truly a pollutant? It isn't. We break down the debate. I've been having this debate for a long time, and people come at me and go, well, no, it's not carbon dioxide, it's the amount. And it's like, yo, man, that has nothing to do with it. If you really want to know why the planet is in peril, it's because asshole mad scientists burned a hole in the ozone, and moisture apparently is leaking out into space, making the planet drier, and also letting in very, very harmful radiation from the sun into the planet. At least that's my theory. The Trump administration moves to change EPA rules, asserting that carbon dioxide isn't a threat to public health. It isn't. And I said they were going to go so far as putting meters on masks that you were required to wear to monitor your CO2 exhalation. One American News, Trump says Xi Jinping told him China would not invade Taiwan while he's U.S. president. Of course not. Peace through strength. The thing is, it was an acquiescence for Democrats who are socialists anyway. So it's just like, I'm just going to look over here, and if you do something, I will, give a firm rebuke, but then they won't do anything. So of course, Xi Jinping is going to wait for a Democrat/socialist in the White House, because then he'll know he has an ally there. I will tell you, this is Trump posting, I guess. Was it in an interview or did he post it? No, it was on Fox News Special Report. I will tell you, you have a very similar thing with President Xi of China and Taiwan, but I don't believe that there's any way it's going to happen as long as I'm here. We'll see. He told me, referring to Xi Jinping, I will never do anything as long as you're president. Whether that's true or not, that's coming from Trump. We don't know. Well, I appreciate that. But I'm very patient, and China is very patient. And other big news, Bolivians vote out socialists after 2 decades in power. Thank God. Voters angered by soaring inflation, like they had in Argentina. That's why Milei came in, and why they voted in Bolsonaro in Brazil. Voters angered by soaring inflation because liberals, socialists, like to spend tax dollars or like to use your tax dollars to the point where there's no money left. And fuel shortages back market-friendly candidates to overhaul the economy. You mean like Javier Milei in Argentina? Socialism doesn't work financially, fiscally, economically. It's one thing if you want to have some sort of social welfare system like we have in the United States, where some of your tax dollars go to benefit the poor and indigent. Okay, we have that. No need to expand it. You want to make sure poor people don't become so destitute that it's a social ill. But if you're poor and you need assistance, we're going to give you assistance, but that doesn't mean you're not going to be poor anymore. Fox News, illegal alien accused of causing fatal semi-truck crash that killed 3 people, shocking and criminal. Harjinder Singh was granted a commercial driver's license by the state of California. Go figure. What did he do? See this wreck? He commenced an illegal U-turn, jackknifed the tractor trailer because he obviously wasn't well trained enough, and he killed a family in a minivan while operating a commercial semi-truck with a trailer on the Florida Turnpike, not in California. In Fort Pierce, Singh allegedly attempted a U-turn in an unauthorized area. This resulted in the tractor trailer jackknifing and colliding with a minivan. All three of the minivan's passengers dead. Thanks, California. Thanks, Gavin Newsom. Thanks for your sanctuary policies. They don't have any unintended consequences, dude. That's the thing with all Democrats and liberal or progressive policy. They don't think of the unintended consequences of their action. They're just like, oopsie, but we meant to do right. I'm sorry. We were trying to do the right thing. So, an illegal immigrant truck driver has been arrested and faces deportation after allegedly attempting to make an unauthorized U-turn in Florida. Singh, who entered the country illegally and obtained a commercial's driver's license in California, has been charged with 3 counts of vehicular homicide. Post-millennial, ICE deported over 1,400 illegal immigrants per day. Hooray. ICE currently has more than 59,000 people in custody, with arrests averaging 930 per day and deportations surging to a record rate of 1,400 daily over the past 2 weeks. What I also heard this morning was that the backlog of deportation court cases has been at its lowest, I think, in a couple decades. So it's not just about arresting, it's about the speed of the judicial system, because if you're an illegal alien, you're deported. That's the law. There's no, and the fact that you have hang-ups and give this guy a hearing and hear his life story, and it's, most of these people do not deserve asylum. And so they were told by the NGOs to come and declare asylum, but most of the asylum claims were illegitimate. Again, from the post-millennial, Attorney General Pam Bondi, demands Washington and Oregon terminate sanctuary policies or risk federal funding. I agree. You can't, it's the same thing that the South did. You know, it's the Democrats or the South. If anybody during the Civil War, people don't know. It's the Confederate states said the federal, and that's the Federalist Society, the federal jurisdiction is everywhere in every state, particularly when it has to deal with federal law, which illegal border crossings is the responsibility of the federal government. That federal law needs to be implemented in certain states, and states can't just go, you know, we're not going to cooperate. So there's a great amount of sovereignty and independence with the states. However, you must comply with federal authority. So Pam Bondi went on to say, you are hereby notified that your jurisdiction has been identified as one that engages in sanctuary policies and practices that thwart federal immigration enforcement to the detriment of the interests of the United States. This ends now. Point. You're thwarting. It's not like if the feds come in and try to police marijuana or something like that. That's not the same. Smuggling, maybe. If drugs are smuggled into the United States, that's federal authority, but not with local enforcement. PJ Media, Portland Antifa riot at ICE facility again. This is part of the problem with, again, the ICE facility is a federal facility, and the feds have the right to police that situation. Because if people are attacking a federal establishment, federal building, that the feds have the right to round up those people, and they should. Doesn't matter if the state or the city or whatever acquiesce to these street thugs. I'm all for peaceful protests. You want to stand outside the ICE facility with your signs and your megaphone? Great. Oh, here's the text from the Rubio thing. Knew it went somewhere. Again, from the post-millennial, Kathy Hochul pardons over a dozen illegal immigrants with criminal records, including a man convicted of manslaughter. Among those pardoned was Somasith Vadavong, 52, was convicted of manslaughter in 1990. That was a long time ago. I don't have a problem with this. If you're pardoning somebody, even if it's murder, you got to know the details of the case. But the reason she's doing all this is so these illegal immigrants will avoid deportation. That's wrong. It's not saying, hey, there's an old guy in prison that committed a heinous crime 30 years ago. I'm going to give him a break. Okay. I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm just saying it's okay and it's within the purview of the governor to do. However, using pardons to thwart, as we pointed out with Pam Bondi's statement, to thwart the investigation and the law enforcement duties of federal officials, that's something else. I screwed up this whole friggin' thing. Yeah, it's a ballot stuffing. Yeah, something when I was importing all my slides here, for some reason they imported it backwards. So everything was fucked up. PJ Media, ICE doxer is busted while live streaming and suddenly a tow truck shows up. The tow truck wasn't for her anyway. I don't know. Independent reporters say the Colombian social media influencer was pulled from her Tesla in the parking garage of her apartment building. She resisted arrest and was heard yelling in Spanish to the officers, wait, wait, wait. They weren't listening. She told officers she was hurt. The video shows she was taken to a hospital by ambulance before reportedly being taken into custody by ICE. If you're thwarting, because basically it's a conspiracy with the criminals being rounded up. If you're thwarting law enforcement activity, you should be arrested. Believe you me, sometimes as my role as a journalist, I just be standing in a spot and the cop is like, get out of here. And, I would leave, a little ways away. But some of my colleagues wouldn't, and my colleagues were arrested because they were impeding law enforcement activity. You can't do that. It's a law. I mean, it's not like I necessarily agree with the law. I'm libertarian. I agree with less laws, but it is the law, and I think laws should be enforced. I don't agree with some laws like speeding, like no victim laws, smoking in public or even drinking in public or speeding is other motor vehicle infraction. I'm a little more authoritarian on because they literally save lives. But I believe you can speed safely if you drive correctly. They do it in Europe on the Autobahn all the time. You can drive 100 miles an hour. Or there was a point when I was driving in Montana where there was no speed limit. I was driving over 100 miles an hour. No problem. And I got across the strait. I got across the state in record time. Half as long as it would have taken me if I was driving the speed. All right, this is this woman here, Tatiana Martinez, last video before ICE took her into custody in downtown Los Angeles from an ex-post by Sarah Sansoni, who apparently can't spell custody. What is the wrong with what? I don't understand. If you read books, your spelling and vocabulary improves. This is a matter of course. But if you don't read, you can't spell custody. Because if you read, even if you read news articles, not even books, if you just read news articles, you'd know how custody is spelled. Tatiana Martinez, a veritable TikTok Tokyo Rose, was busted by immigration and customs enforcement officers in LA while broadcasting to her followers. Good. Speaking of corruption, One American News, New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell indicted following corruption investigation. Now, this investigation has been going on for some time. Really, for quite some time, when it was found out that she and her boyfriend, which of course, a lot like, what's her name, Fannie Willis in Georgia, all of a sudden you start dating this guy and then you hire him and then you use taxpayer funds to fund your lifestyle. Exactly what happened here. Of course, they're all Democrats. According to reports, Cantrell's indictment follows 2 years of scrutiny, including a relationship with Vappy, a legal dispute with New Orleans resident who photographed the alleged affair because she tried to sue him for slander, a lawsuit with New Orleans public schools over a broken multi-billion-dollar funding promise, the indictment over a former city inspector accused of bribing her with Saints tickets, and frequent travel amid an ongoing jail escape and the aftermath of a mass power outage. I know a lot of people. I don't want to sound racist. Let's just put it this way. I know a lot of people who get into public office and then see it as their little piggy bank. And all of a sudden, because they become a public servant, they're rich, bitch. According to the same slide, Cantrell was handed an 18-count indictment with charges that include conspiracy, wire fraud, conspiracy to obstruct justice, false statements, obstruction of justice, and lying to a federal grand jury. Jeffrey Vappy, the mayor's former New Orleans Police Department bodyguard, who was charged last summer with wire fraud and false statements. So she was dating this New Orleans cop. She hired him as her bodyguard so they could be with each other all the time. And then apparently was paying him like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And that wasn't enough for them. Then they were raiding the taxpayer piggy bank. Post-millennial Michigan Democrat city councilman probed by state police over alleged ballot box stuffing. Let me get back to this slide here. Bear with me. Abu Mustafa, I think it is. Yeah, Abu Musa was the guy in Michigan. This was all over the news too. I mean, if you watch mainstream media, you wouldn't have seen it, but. So this Michigan Democrat city councilman, now councilman is like if you didn't know, I don't want to patronize people, but if you didn't know, councilman is like, it's the legislative body, is the common council or city council is the legislative body of a municipality. So if you're a councilman, it's sort of like being a congressman in the United States Congress, the House. Cities don't have senates, states have senates, but whatever. So he was probed by state police over alleged ballot box stuffing. So he was running in a primary, and surveillance footage from August 1st, just 3 days before the city's primary, shows a vehicle pulling up to the ballot box. The probe focuses on residency issues and questions about the election conduct. Surveillance footage shows a vehicle pulling up to the ballot box. The passenger appears to be Musa. Can be seen as another man places 3 stacks of ballots into the box. Musa was running for re-election at the time. But, do I have the other one? No. Oh, it's here in the X post. He won by just 76 votes. So the ballot box stuffing, illegal, mind you, could have very well resulted in his victory. Of course, the reason people commit election fraud is to throw the election. Now, the courts may find that it didn't have any impact, blah, blah, blah. The whole point of doing it is to affect the election. So whether you find all the fraudulent votes that affect the election, but if they're fraud coming from a bunch of different vectors, which is the most complicated to unwind because, okay, you find some mail-in ballots that are fraudulent. You don't find all of them, but you also don't find voting machine hacking or other modes of fraud. You might not uncover the extent of fraud that could have changed the outcome of the election. There should be like a certain threshold that if there's a certain amount of fraud, you have to redo the election. New York Post, ex-FBI Director James Comey makes bizarre confession about Taylor Swift and President Trump in rambling video. I'm not going to go into what he said. It doesn't matter. He just said, Trump doesn't like Taylor Swift, and all she's trying to do is be her best self, blah, blah, blah. That's not the point. See, Comey is very in tune into the psychological operations of intelligence. And what he's trying to do, as he's facing indictment, is to attach himself as a fan, a Swiftie, a consort, a ally of someone very popular. And so when you attach yourself to somebody very popular, then that'll give you a certain amount of protection. That'll insulate you to some degree in the social psyche. Moving to one of the last articles here. We got a couple minutes. Boy crisis of 2025. Meet the boy problem in the 1900s. This is a stupid. So they keep doubling down on their same theories in the New York Times. It's stupid. A while back they had this thing about the man problem. The man problem was caused by the left. It's really a communist and socialist idea is to undermine the nuclear family, and you do that by attacking the head of the nuclear family, which is usually the father, the husband, whatever. And so they've been undermining masculinity and the men's worth, the worth of the human male, not just men. Fucking check, please. Let's hold on there a second. Sorry. I don't know. I just bought a new friggin' camera battery, and I don't know if that's the new one or the old one. I might have to buy another one because that one doesn't last very long, less than an hour. So we're talking about this boy crisis opinion piece in the New York Times, and they had this other one talking about men, the man problem, but what they've been doing is undermining human males for some time in a communist socialist effort to undermine the nuclear family. Of course, people don't understand. Oh, masculinity, toxic masculinity, and the patriarchy and all this shit. You know, fuck you, third wave feminists and all you. Fuck you. Everybody has worth. So the great thing about Christian humanism is every human has worth. I believe the same amount of worth, regardless of what your attributes to society are, how much money you have or whatever. So the bum on the street and the billionaire, to me, have the same worth. Every human is worth. It doesn't matter to me your contribution to society. And men and women are equally, to me, have equal worth. I don't think, the life of a child has more worth, has worth However, adults have the capability to do more. So it's not like their life is worth more, but in consideration for society, children don't really contribute to society. I'm not saying that they don't have any worth to society, but as children, you get my point, hopefully. So, yeah, it's all backwards. I don't know why it loaded backwards. In the early years of the 20th century, if you didn't know, this is their stupid case. America had a boy problem. Boys on the streets, truants, making trouble. Boys becoming, well, I just said that. Boys becoming truants. Boys getting caught up in crime. The problem spread across the United States along the disruption of technological change, immigration, and growing socioeconomic equality. That has nothing to do with it. Policymakers stepped in with universal public schooling, which you were required to send your kids to school. But it was a civic response, a truly extraordinary, the founding of Big Brothers, Federated Boys Club, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, but that's not a boy problem. Girl Scout. The point is there's no such thing as babysitters, right? The parents would go to work and the kids would just roam around. And so when they made public schooling compulsory, that's where you get truancy. It kind of, and those others that had even more severe problems had these other outlets, the clubs and so forth and so on. Totally different. They're trying to equate it that also back then there was technological change, immigration, and growing social economic inequality. The socioeconomic inequality may be because the kids didn't have private school or nannies or anything like that the rich had to keep tabs on the children. But immigration and technological change had little to do with it. They're trying to say that, child labor, that once the machinery came in, they didn't need child labor. It's just bull. Oops. But many boys and men are struggling today too. So in 1900, there was a boy problem, and now all of a sudden today, there's a boy and man problem. You know, the way they equate this shit is, I don't know even how this makes it into a major newspaper. And then technological trade, immigration, and growing inequality. It has nothing to do with it. It has to do with the media propaganda campaign, socialist, communist propaganda campaign to undermine the nuclear family by undermining the head of the nuclear family, which is the husband, father, etc. And then it goes into what's going wrong. Suicide rates among men have risen because they don't feel like they have any worth. Because you're undermining the basic tenet of being a man, which is masculinity. Not saying that you need to be masculine to be a man. As I said, men come with the greater responsibility of stoically shouldering responsibility. Stop your fucking whining. Not saying you can't complain. Everybody complains. But it's not. That's what being a man is stoically shouldering your responsibility, whatever it may be. They're now higher than they are among middle-aged men, by young men committing suicide who have their whole life ahead of them. There is a technological component today. It's called AI. Nobody has jobs, and your job prospects are weak. College degrees have fallen. 1 in 10 men aged 20 to 24 is effectively doing nothing, neither enrolled in school nor working, because they feel dejected and displaced, disenfranchised, you could say. That's twice the rate in 1990. The crisis demands a response equivalent to what the progressive era delivered. Not just the public policy, but equally. It's the progressives that cause the current problem. Psychologically, with young men. Dumbass. We don't need a progressive problem. You can create all the clubs you want. That's not going to fix it. The people that are fixing it are on the right. Like the Proud Boys. You don't want to talk about that. Things that instill pride, the pride of being a man. Go on to say. Oh, we're going to go into the last headline here. Because we're out of time. Zero Hedge. Judge puts InfoWars up for sale again as leftist claimer for Alex Jones's takedown. If you didn't know the absurdity of this case, someone who was exercising his free speech was sued for $1.5 billion in damages for defamation. See, defamation should be you have to prove lost income over whatever disruption was caused by the defamation. There was nobody lost $1.5 billion because Alex Jones said something on his show. So Zero Hedge points out the absurdity of this whole thing. And then we all know that the officials in charge of the initial auction allegedly rigged the outcome in favor of the sale to leftist propaganda rag The Onion. The Onion did not have the cash on hand to service their $7 million bid for sale. Instead, they relied on a deal that would have tapped into Jones's future payments to the plaintiffs. They only offered $1.7 million in actual cash, which was significantly less than the $7 million that was put forth, or no, it was $3.5 million that was put forth by one of Jones's allies that was going to buy InfoWars. So in other words, this suggests that the plaintiffs were willing to sacrifice part of their damages, which are $1.5 billion for some reason, just to see the Onion take control of InfoWars and humiliate Jones. So a new decision by Judge Maya Gira Gamble on Wednesday hearing orders the InfoWars parent company Free Speech Systems is once again turned over to a coin-appointed receiver who will be responsible for selling the assets and using the proceeds to pay some of Jones's debt to the Sandy Hook family. Which it shouldn't. The problem is that they sued Jones. Did they sue the Lanzas? No, they didn't. Okay? So the family that supposedly produced the autistic kid that murdered their children, they weren't sued, but some guy on a little-known radio show was supposedly to blame. And by the way, I investigated this. We have little to no evidence. There was one guy who showed up at the Victoria Soto run, was just to, honor Victoria Soto, and said nasty things to the Soto family and said he was sent by Alex Jones. And no one's really ever to find out who that guy was. They did name the person, but no one could track down this person. So, and apparently also there were anonymous letters written to the family and supposedly, not proven, there's no evidence to show that graves of the children, the child victims were defaced. And there's no proof of that either. I didn't see any pictures or anything. It's just a news blurb that, someone wrote something nasty on the site and said, oh, I'm sent by InfoWars. Just like the guy that went to Comet Pizza. I was sent by Alex Jones, said the actor. All right. I think that's it for me today. I don't know if the stream even went through today. I hope it did. Like I said, I'm going to have to struggle with this week, and then hopefully on my return, I will have a new laptop. Let's see. I need to get this one, keep going, because even when I get the new laptop, it's going to take me a few days to integrate everything, so we'll see.
My hand.
Fuck.
In my hand. In my
Hate
mouth.
technology. Love technology. I like technology, but I also hate it because it never works the way it's supposed to. All right, we'll see. When I look at the recording, I'm going to post I'll post the episode on YouTube, and I'm gonna try streaming to YouTube, because usually this doesn't happen on YouTube, because the OBS seems to be working fine. It just doesn't. I look at my Rumble feed and it's just like stuck. So I'm gonna try maybe tomorrow to multi-stream, maybe on X too, and see if that doesn't produce a better result with the live stream. But I will be working to rectify the problem, so don't give up on me. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace out. Respect.
I'm
I'm on
Donald
a
Trump,
stick.
and I approve this message.
I like a steak. The stick.
I kill you!
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm an American. I have rights.
I have this ice cream in my hand. In my hand. And then in my mouth.
Look at me, bitch.